This May versus Corbyn, the battle for number 10. It's time for our audience and you at home to meet the Prime Minister, Theresa May.
Hello, Percy. Happy birthday, by the way.
OK, well, let's get started with our first question from Martin. Martin.
Good evening, Prime Minister.
Good evening,
As a
Martin.
serving police officer, I've been witness to the devastating effects of police cuts during your time as Home Secretary. And now, after the horrendous terrorist attacks in Manchester last Monday, we have seen the need to draft in the military. What promise can you make to increase the number of police officers? And can I ask you to provide us with a specific number of how many extra police officers will be recruited under your government and how you propose to fund it?
Well, Martin, as a serving police officer, obviously you'll be aware that we have police and counter-terrorism police. We've been very clear that we have protected the budgets for counter-terrorism policing, and we're currently protecting overall police budgets as well. And we're ensuring that we're putting money in to enable the police to address what are actually different ways, as you will know, different types of crime. Crime is changing and policing will be changing in the future. It's why we're putting more money, for example, into cyber policing, because increasingly we see those as the sort of crimes that are having to be addressed. We did do what was called Operation Tempora, which enabled the military to assist the police following the terrible, horrific attack that took place in Manchester. That's been a well-prepared plan for some time, and that was put into operation smoothly and is now being run down. What is important is that we not only ensure we have the counter-terrorism police we need and the overall police that we need, but also that they have the powers that they need. And that's what I've done as Home Secretary. I ensured that we brought through new legislation to put powers into place which gave the police what they were asking for in order to be able to deal with counter-terrorism.
Prime Minister, just clarify for Martin, when you became Home Secretary, the staff numbers of police were 141,850. That's September 2010. What are they now? 124,000. So that's down 20,000. That's what he's talking about. And armed officers was nearly 7,000 in March 2010, and now...
We're currently having an uplift in the number of armed officers. We agreed that not just the normal armed officers should be increased, but actually the counter-terrorism specialist officers as well.
But they were cut over 6 years, and you've had to put them back up. Was that a mistake? Is that...
What we had to do when we came into government in 2010 was to ensure that we were living within our means, and that was very important because of the economic situation we'd inherited. Now, what we need to do in policing terms is ensure it's not just about the numbers of police. People often focus on the numbers of police. It's actually about what the police are able to do and how they are being deployed on our streets. As I say, in counter-terrorism policing, we have protected those budgets and we're currently protecting police budgets. But crime is changing. And the sort of job that the police officers need to do is changing. That's why we're also putting extra money into things like cybercrime, because that's today's world. So a government has to ensure that we're keeping abreast with the changes that take place, with the challenges that there are out there that we need to deal with. And of course the terrorist threat is severe. That's where it is at the moment. But that's why we ensure that our police, our security service, have that counter-terrorism budgets. We are increasing the budgets for our security services as well, but also that they have the powers they need to do the job.
Just a quick comeback, Martin.
I appreciate you protecting the budgets, but we still need the staff to carry out the role of a police officer of keeping the public safe.
OK, well, let's move on to Philip. Philip.
Prime Minister, in my first job 74 years ago, I earned the princely sum of 31 shillings a week, which is £1.55 in current money. I lived in a council house with my 4 siblings and my parents in the George Orwell's Wigan of the 1930s. Over the years, due to our hard work and the work of my late wife, we came to own our own home, and it is now mortgage-free. I don't like the prospect of being unable to leave it to our family with a greatly eroded value, which I fear is what would happen if you were to introduce your so-called dementia tax. So why, Prime Minister, should we, in my generation, vote for you?
Well, Philip, thank you, because you've raised an issue which I know a lot of people are looking at and thinking about. And it's a really important issue because one of the great challenges that we face as a society and that government faces is the fact that our society is ageing. We see more people. It's great that people are living longer, but of course that has an impact in terms of the services we have to provide and ensuring people can have the dignity in their old age. Now, the situation, as I'm sure you know at the moment, is that if you require care and you have savings of more than £23,000, you have to pay for that care. And if the care you require is residential care, then your house, the value of your house, is taken into account. So what happens is people are paying for care, people are finding that they are having to sell their house, many people are having to sell their house to pay those care bills, and many find that they're not able to leave the money to their families. Now, I want to take those risks away, and that's what the proposals I've put forward are about. It's about ensuring that nobody is going to have to sell their house to pay for care in their lifetime. It's about ensuring that £100,000 of savings, of assets, are protected to pass on to the family. We'll put a cap on the an absolute cap on the level of money that people have to spend on care. And I think what we're doing is ensuring that we can have a sustainable solution for the long term. If I can just give one figure, Faisal, in 10 years' time, there will be 2 million more people aged over 75. If we don't address the issue of our social care system now, then it is going to collapse. We need to do it and do it in a way that's fairer to younger generations. And that's what my plans are for.
Prime Minister, can you just clarify for Philip and people at home, what is the cap? Is it a manifesto policy that there'll be a cap?
There will be a cap, yes. What we set out in the manifesto was the principles of our position. I then saw a lot of scaremongering about that. I heard a lot of scaremongering about it and recognised that people would be worried as a result of that.
100,000,
so we
500,000?
clarified that there will be a cap. But what we will do, Faisal, is not just put a figure on it. What we will do is publish a green paper, a consultation document. We'll listen to people, we'll listen to voters, we'll listen to charities and organisations working with older people. We'll take people's views on where that cap should be. And I think that's a fairer way to do it.
OK. Amanda.
Good evening. Are we dividing England and Scotland by allowing a winter fuel allowance for over 60s in Scotland? Is this fair?
Well, we have a situation, as you know, where there's a devolved government in Scotland and they have the ability to make separate decisions on a whole variety of issues affecting people in Scotland, and they've been given extra powers in relation to dealing with welfare. So it is up to them to make that decision as to how they choose to apply certain welfare benefits. We have said, and we will in government, means test the winter fuel payment. And the reason for doing that is this. At the moment, we have a situation where pensioners who are better off are getting that help and support, where you see working families who might be struggling not getting that sort of support. And I think it's right, and I think, I've met pensioners who've said to me that they don't think they should get that winter fuel payment. What we will do with the money that's released is we'll put it into health and social care. So it will be going towards actually ensuring that those systems are providing better quality care for older people and others.
So, Prime Minister, we know that Scottish pensioners will keep the winter fuel allowance. Can you tell us how many English pensioners will lose it? The IFS have assumed 6 million, the Resolution Foundation 10 million. It's clearly several million, isn't it?
Well, what we're going to do, Faisal, I'm sorry, it's exactly the same as I've just said on the social care cap, is once again, I think this is an issue where we need not just to pull out a figure in an election campaign, but actually to listen to people, to talk to people, to take people's views, and then make a proposal as government. So there's a proper consultation. So we're actually hearing from voters, we're hearing from organisations and charities and others who work with older people about what they think is the right level to set that threshold for winter fuel payments at. But the key thing, the key principle that will drive what we do is that less well-off pensioners will be protected.
OK, all right, let's move on to Nicola.
Good evening. As a teacher and mother of two, I am incredibly concerned by your proposed changes to school funding, with my local constituency of Batley and Spen one of the worst affected areas. Prime Minister, despite your manifesto promises, these cuts are clearly unsustainable. Are you prepared to change your current plans to prevent further damage to our schools?
Well, Nicola, what we will do in government is put further record levels of funding into schools. But we also do want to look at ensuring that the money is being distributed in a fair way. And as you probably know, there are some schools in the country today that may receive twice the amount of funding for a pupil that other schools receive. I think it's important that we see a fair way of funding our schools. What we're committed to is ensuring that as we introduce that, schools won't see any cash reduction in their level of funding. But I actually want to do more than that, because I believe that education is absolutely crucial. We want our youngsters to get the best possible start in life. And that's why I want to see a more diverse system of schools available for people. I want to bring in some of the expertise that we see in universities, for example, in supporting schools. There are some good examples of that at the moment. Let's do more of that. Let's make sure that every child has a good school place and a school place that is right for them, because that's about ensuring they get the best possible start in life, to be the best that they can, because I want our society to be one where it's down to your talents and hard work how far you go, and not where you came from or who your parents are.
I think Nicola's question was about per pupil funding in real terms. You've said it's going to go up £4 billion, but that is going down. In real terms, per pupil, it is going down. Can you clarify that?
Nobody can guarantee the real terms per pupil funding increase. In the Labour Party's manifesto, we know the figures don't add up. What is important is that as we look...
You've clearly failed.
Just please let the Prime Minister answer.
Sorry.
Please.
Sorry. What we need to do is to ensure we will put those record levels of funding into schools. We need to ensure that we get that better spread of funding in terms of the fair funding formula. But I also say this, if you look at what happens in education, it's not just people are focusing on funding, but actually we need to ensure that we do see good or outstanding schools and more good or outstanding places in good or outstanding schools for children. We've seen the number increase over the last 7 years. We need to carry on doing that so that there is a good school place for every child. And that isn't just about funding, it's about a whole variety of things that go to make up really good education for children.
OK, next question, Joy.
Oops. Hello, I'm over here. Theresa May, could you please justify to me why I have leaflets saved at home, delivered to me by my local Conservatives before the EU referendum, stating clearly that we will save £350 million per week for the NHS if we leave the EU? That lie is the only reason why I, and I'm sure many others here tonight possibly, decided to vote leave.
There were a number of claims made during the referendum campaign on both sides of the argument, and there were some passionately held views and some really passionate arguments on both sides. I think what's important now is that we ensure that we get the best possible deal from Brexit. That is about negotiating a really good deal for Britain. It is about ensuring that in future we won't be sending vast sums of money to the European Union every year, as we do as members of the EU. And we will be able to look at what, as funding comes back, how we use that funding. But it is important that we get that best possible deal, because it underpins so much else of what we want to do. And we can only get that deal if we've got a plan to go in there and really stand up for Britain. And the negotiations will start 11 days after Election Day. So we have to know what we're doing, we have to have a strong hand in the negotiations and be very clear about getting the best possible deal for Britain.
That wasn't quite an... Are you happy with that answer, Joy? Well, there we go. Persuaded Joy. Well, let's move on to Angela.
Prime Minister, I'm a midwife in Devon, and I believe the wealth of a nation lies in the health of its workforce. How do you justify the chronic underfunding of the NHS that I see at work, considering that we now have one of the lowest budgets according to GDP?
Well, once again, if we look at the health service, and obviously you work in the health service, so you know the enormity of the task that the health service faces. We're making greater demands on the health service every year. The overall figure is we're spending over the 5 years up to 2020, we'll be spending £500 billion in total on the National Health Service. And we do need to make sure that money is being spent well, of course. So we are increasing the funding into the health service and will increase funding into the health service in the future. And we're committed to that in our manifesto, both in terms of buildings and technology, but also in terms of increasing the per-head funding for the National Health Service in real terms every year. It's important. We all rely on the health service. We all know people either who work in the health service like yourself, who've been through the health service, who've had great care and attention from the fantastic staff in the health service. That's why we're ensuring that we are putting more money into the NHS and more money for the future, as well as what is happening at the moment. We want that first-class NHS, but we can only do that if we have a really strong economy to pay for it. And that's where the Brexit negotiations, but so much else actually comes in, because it's making sure we get that right deal for Britain from Brexit, that we can build on the strong economy and the economic progress we've made in the last few years. Because if we do that, then we have that money to fund that first-class National Health Service. That's what we're committed to.
OK, what did you think of that answer? I'll throw it back to you.
I see a lot of efficiency savings that are actually cuts. I see hospitals closing. I see staff that are at their wits' end because they can't give the care that they want to give. I'll believe it when I see it.
OK, let's go to Sandeep. Sandeep. Where's Sandeep? Sandeep.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Thank
Hello,
you.
Prime Minister.
Hello.
Prime Minister, describing yourself and being described as a bloody difficult woman may be helpful in Brexit negotiations with the EU. But do you think the same attitude, when applied to domestic policy, such as welfare reform and cuts, have reinforced the image of the Conservatives being called the nasty party again?
When I was described as, in the terms that you've said, as a difficult woman, I think it was about, because my colleague who used that term saw me as somebody who actually stood by what I thought was right and was willing to fight for what I believe is the right thing to do. And that's what drives me. It's doing what is the right thing by the country. And sometimes you have to be difficult in order to do that. But if I look at what's coming ahead to this country, we stand at a very important moment in our history. We have the opportunity now to really change this country for the better, for the future. And that is about tough negotiations for Brexit, but it's also about facing up to those domestic challenges like the ageing society, like the changing face we see in the workplace, the increased technology in the workplace. All of these are things that we need to have a government that recognises it, is open about those issues, and is willing to find ways of addressing them. And if, in order to address them and do the right thing by the country, it takes being a difficult woman, then that's exactly what I will be.
So, Prime Minister, the question was about nasty party applied to domestic policy, and you're asking fairly uniquely for a massive majority. Already, Prime Minister, you want a really big majority. That will also apply to domestic policy. And you voted for things that subsequently you turned on, like tax credits cuts in 2015. Isn't that what will not be able to be turned around when you have a larger majority, if that's what you get?
Well, you say, what I'm doing, Faisal, is actually going out across the country, asking people, yes, to put their, for me to gain their trust so that they will support me at this election. Because I think it is important to have a strong hand in the negotiations for Brexit, to have that strong mandate for those negotiations. But we also have a lot of challenges to face here in this country. And as I've said, Brexit is one of the challenges, getting that right. Our ageing society is another. The divisions within our society is another. And the issue of making sure we have a strong economy and facing the impact of changing technology and the impact that's having on our lives and our workplaces, everybody will know. These are big challenges ahead. And the domestic policies that I've set out are policies to address those challenges. And some of them will involve difficult choices. But I think it's right, if I'm saying to people I want a mandate to be Prime Minister and to have the government of this country, that we're actually open with people, that there will be some hard choices.
OK, well, that brings us to the end.
Theresa May, when did you realise that you'd got the wrong answer to the biggest question of our times in politics?
Well, I'm tempted to ask you, Jeremy, what you think. Do you mean that you're talking about Brexit?
Well, of course.
Right. Well, there are lots of challenges in our politics at the moment. There are lots of challenges that the government face.
I'm just curious,
I campaigned.
What was it convinced you that Brexit was so bad for Britain?
I set out my reasons for deciding that we should, on balance, stay within the European Union. I voted to remain. I campaigned to remain.
And when did you change your mind?
The British people were given the choice, and the British people decided that they wanted the United Kingdom to leave the European Union.
So you're now stuck with trying to deliver something you believe is bad for this country.
I'm delivering what I believe the British people want their government to deliver. And I think it's very important. I think it's not just an issue about Brexit itself. It's actually an issue, to me, about trust in politicians.
Hang on a second. You said in March last year that we would be more secure, more prosperous and more influential, virtually in those words, if we stayed in the European Union. And now you want to take us out of it.
And I also said that the sky wouldn't fall in if we left the European Union.
So you have changed your mind, have you?
We gave people the choice.
You've changed your mind?
I'll answer that in a minute. We gave people the choice, Jeremy, and the British people decided to leave the European Union. Yeah. And I think it's important for them to see their politicians delivering on that choice and respecting the will of the people. And what I think's
Sure, OK. So you've changed your mind?
What I am now doing is...
Have you changed your mind?
I think there are huge opportunities.
Have you changed your mind?
Jeremy, I know that you have used this tactic and you want...
I'm just trying to get an answer.
Yes,
that's all. You can say yes or no. I haven't changed my mind. Yes, I have changed my mind. Say what you like.
I take the view that we can make a success of Brexit. I take the view that the British people want us to make that success.
But you don't believe in it?
Of course, Jeremy, as Prime Minister, I've been out there already ensuring that the negotiations are going to start, and I want to ensure that there's a strong hand in those negotiations. I believe in making a success of Brexit for the whole of the United Kingdom.
But you don't really believe in it, do you?
I believe in making a success of Brexit.
Let me look at it another way. How was it that people like Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, David Davis, Priti Patel, even Andrea Leadsom, they all got it right and you got it wrong?
I voted... Well, there's no gainsaying the fact that I campaigned to remain and voted to remain.
Sure,
but I also
still think it's a duff idea.
I said it was a balance... Sorry.
You still think it's a duff idea, don't you?
No, I think that...
You haven't changed your mind.
Look, the referendum drew a line under those debates. What the referendum did was took the view of the British people. Now, I think it's right that we do that now. And I genuinely think that if we get Brexit right, and this is really important for us, if we get Brexit right, we can make a real success of the opportunities that open up for us. But we can only do that if we grasp those opportunities.
But you still think it's a bad idea?
No, I believe we're doing the right thing in making a success of Brexit.
Well, of course you want to make a success of it. Can we look at something else that you've changed your mind on, or perhaps not changed your mind on? Social care. Now, you had a manifesto commitment which said there would be a cap on the cost of social care. Then your latest manifesto dropped that. And for clarification, the Health Secretary said there will be no cap. And 4 days later, you said there will be a cap.
We had what Jeremy Hunt was talking about and what we referred to in our manifesto was the specific proposal. This proposal was put forward by Andrew Dilnot a few years ago when he was asked by government to look at the social care issue. And if I just explain why we rejected that Dilnot proposal, Jeremy, it was because, for two reasons. First of all, because it was going to be paid for out of general taxation. And secondly, because that Dilnot proposal protected wealthier pensioners but did nothing to protect pensioners on modest incomes. Now, the proposals I've put forward actually do that. They do help pensioners on modest incomes, and crucially, they ensure we have a long-term, sustainable solution for social care.
OK, you have said earlier that it's very important that people can trust their politicians and their governments. Can I ask you, explicitly, unambiguously, what will the cap be?
Well, as I've just answered, I'm not going to give you a different answer from the one I've given Faisal. No, it's not about not knowing, Jeremy. It's about thinking what... It's about thinking,
don't know, do you?
It's about thinking what the right approach is to get to that figure.
But you don't know.
What we want to do is to ask, is to consult, is to listen, and then to determine what that cut will be.
Have you even thought what the cost of the taxpayer will be?
I think that's only fair to people, that we actually go through that consultation and say to people and take people's views as we determine that cap.
Just at a philosophical level, you said you went into politics to help the just about managing. How is enabling rich people to pass on wealth to the next generation helping the just about managing?
What is helping is ensuring that we don't have a long-term solution for our social...
No, my question was how it helped the just about managing.
And I'm answering your question,
You're not.
Jeremy. You have asked me about the just about managing and how they're being helped. And what I'm going to point out is that if you have a social care system which relies on taxing those just about managing at higher levels, that's not helping them. What we're doing is putting forward a proposal which means that people don't have to sell their house in their lifetime to pay for care. It means they can pass on savings to their children, and it means there will be that cap. But it's fair across the generations. And there are older people today who worry that their children and grandchildren won't have a better future.
Can we look at something else on which you've changed your mind? Only this March, in the budget, you proposed to increase national insurance contributions from the self-employed. Within a week, you backed down from that. You accept that?
Yes, I accept that. And we very clearly stated at the time...
You see, what one's bound to say is, if I was sitting in Brussels and I was looking at you as the person I had to negotiate with, I'd think, she's a blowhard who collapses at the first sign of gunfire. Isn't that right?
I think, Jeremy, you'll find that what the people in Brussels look at is the record that I had of negotiating with them in Brussels and delivering for this country on a number of issues on justice and home affairs, which people said we were never going to get.
All right.
And I got those negotiations.
Can you remind us how many times you told us after you became Prime Minister that there would not be a general election until 2020? You did, didn't you? I mean, I got to a grand total of 6 times on which you or your spokesman said there wouldn't be one.
And I said there wouldn't be a general election. And after I became Prime Minister, I felt that the most important thing for the country was the stability and getting on with triggering the Article 50 so that we made sure that we were delivering on that vote on Brexit. What became clear when we were going through that process is that other parties want to frustrate that process of those Brexit negotiations. We have the Liberal Democrats wanting a second referendum.
That's all happened since March, has it?
We have the... Well, actually, it was March. It was in March that I triggered Article 50 by writing the letter to the European Council.
It was in March you told us we didn't need to have a general election because it would destabilise the country until 2020.
And what became clear as we were looking through those negotiations, as they started those negotiations, started the process of triggering them, what became clear, increasingly clear, as is clear in this election campaign, is the desire of other parties to frustrate the will of the British people. That's why I thought it was right to go out for an election.
Prime Minister, are you somebody who takes responsibility for their mistakes?
I take responsibility for the decisions I make, Jeremy.
Right. So you have been how many years in government now?
In government?
Yes.
I've been in government since 2010, so 7 years in government.
7 years in government, and you'll recall the manifesto promises on immigration.
Indeed, I do.
That you'd bring it, you repeated them, in fact, in this manifesto.
Yes.
Said the same thing again because you failed. In your capacity, 6 of those 7 years, you were Home Secretary, weren't you?
I was indeed.
Yeah. Immigration was your main task, to get it down to what you promised in the manifesto, which was 100,000 or less non-EU immigrants per year net. You didn't do that, did you?
Net migration, no, we didn't achieve that. We did, what happened...
Can you just tell us what it is now?
Yes, it was 248,000 in the last set of figures. What we saw was the figures
migrants?
coming... Sorry?
Non-EU migrants?
Was about 175,000.
It's 175,000 according to the latest figures,
yes. What we saw in immigration figures was it started to come down, then they did go up, and now they're starting to come down again. What we will have when we leave the EU...
That was your job.
Is the... Yes. Jeremy, I'm not sitting here saying it wasn't. I'm accepting that what we had to do was to ensure that we were rooting out abuse in the system. But there is no single moment where you take one measure which changes the immigration figures. It is a constant work to ensure that you're dealing with immigration and ensuring there is no more abuse in the system. There's more work to be done. We will, of course, have another tool to do this when we leave the European Union, because we'll be able to introduce rules for people coming from within the European Union. But this will be a constant work.
Who won't be able to come to this country under your new rules?
Well, we're working at the moment on what those new rules should be in terms of...
So you still don't have any idea?
But, no, it's not about... We have a set of rules for people from outside the European Union. We will look at the requirements for... One of the things we do is ensure that it's possible for people to be brought in where there are skill shortages, where there is a need for people to come to work.
And what's the damage going to be to the economy? Have you worked that out?
I think one of the crucial things we need to do in this country is ensure that actually we are enabling people here in the UK to be skilled up to do jobs. I think sometimes what we've seen is people being brought in from overseas because we haven't done sufficient in this country. That's why I think
your friend George Osborne, or your friend
important.
until you sacked him, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, says this policy is economically illiterate.
It's a policy which will actually...
Well, he should know, shouldn't he?
It's a policy which ensures that we are recognising the concerns that people in this country have about uncontrolled immigration. Controlling immigration is important.
Right.
It's important for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons it's important is because uncontrolled migration has an impact on wages at the lower end of the income scale.
Yeah.
People feel an impact from that. That's why I think it's so important that we keep working at this and we keep...
And you say it's much easier. It'll be much easier once we've left the European Union, won't it?
We will be able to introduce rules for people coming from within the European Union once we've left. That's been a piece of the work on immigration.
How much of our money are you prepared to give Brussels in order to get a deal?
I don't think it's going to be about paying over money to get a deal. What I think is important
You're
is
not
that...
prepared to pay anything. I mean, David Davis said he'd walk away at 100,000. 100 billion, sorry.
We have, we've made clear, I've put it in the manifesto, that we will look for a fair...
Would you pay 100 billion to leave the European Union?
That we will put a fair settlement, look for a fair settlement of our rights and obligations. There are a number of figures that are being quoted and being around, a number of them coming from
Have you got any figure in your head?
Union, a number coming from the European Union itself. We will look at our rights and obligations.
Have you got a figure in your head as to how much it's worth paying to get out of this club?
It isn't a question of what it's worth paying to get out. It's a question of what is going to be the right deal for us to leaving the European Union, which will stop us from paying huge sums of money into the EU every single year, which will enable that we have control of our money and our borders and our laws.
But you wouldn't walk out, as David Davis says he would, if there was a request for 100 billion. You wouldn't walk out there.
We will be there to negotiate the right deal. But what I have said is no deal is better than a bad deal. We have to be prepared to walk out.
So you are prepared to walk away from the European Union with no deal?
No deal is better than a bad deal. And let me just tell you...
That wasn't exactly my question.
Yes.
My question was, are you prepared to walk away...
By definition, if I'm prepared to say that no deal is better than a bad deal, I want to get a good deal from the European Union. What I don't want is the sort of bad deal that some people are talking about. If you think about it, some people in Europe are talking about punishing us, and that would be a bad deal for us. Some people here in the UK talk as if they're willing to do anything to sign up to a deal with the European Union, and that would be a bad deal for us as well.
So
we need to negotiate and negotiate hard.
to leave the European Union with no deal?
As I say, no deal would be better than a bad deal.
You are prepared to leave the European Union with no deal?
I think you can take it, Jeremy. No deal would be better than a bad deal.
Yes, you said that repeatedly.
Yes. I'm not prepared to sign up to a bad deal for the UK. Now, I believe...
So you are prepared to walk away?
I think you have to. In negotiations, you have to recognise that you're prepared, that you're not in there to get a deal at any price. We're in there to get the best deal for the United Kingdom. And actually, I'm optimistic about that, because I think that in the European Union, they will want to continue their relationship with us as well.
You can be as optimistic as you like, but you might have to walk away from it.
What I will be doing is, as we heard in the earlier session, what I'll be doing is being a difficult woman and ensuring that we're negotiating hard. But
Theresa May, thank you very much. Thank you.